When I look back on those years, I realize the red flags were there from the very start. Not the kind that scream at you in bright neon, but the subtle kind. The ones you ignore because you're too wrapped up in the thrill of finally finding someone who seems to see you. That's what she did, or at least what I thought she did. Her name was Emily, and from the moment we met, it felt like the world had conspired to bring us together. I had just turned 35, working long hours at a job I didn't care much for, drifting through weekends with friends who were all either married or about to be. I was tired of being the guy everyone pitied at weddings, the one people nudged towards single women with polite smiles and quiet desperation. When I met Emily, it was at a friend's engagement party. She was standing near the bar, holding a glass of white wine, her laughter sharp and alive, pulling everyone around her into its orbit. I don't remember who introduced us, only that within minutes I was caught in her web. She had this way of looking at you, like every word you said mattered, like you were more interesting than you actually were. That night we talked for hours, long after the party had quieted down, until it was just the two of us on the balcony, the city lights blinking below. She asked me questions no one had ever asked before, about my childhood, about regrets I carried, about what I really wanted out of life. It was intoxicating. When she finally touched my hand, it felt like I had been waiting for that moment my entire life. The first months were everything movies and books promise you about love. She filled the empty spaces in my days. We traveled, we laughed, we made plans that stretched years into the future. She moved into my apartment after only 6 months, and though my friends raised their eyebrows, I brushed it off. When you know, I told them. At the time, I believed it. But perfection doesn't last. At first, the cracks were almost invisible. She would cancel plans at the last minute, saying she had to catch up with an old friend or deal with something personal. She became oddly protective of her phone, always angling the screen away when she typed, keeping it face down on the table. I chalked it up to paranoia. After all, everyone deserves privacy. Still, I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. One night after she came home late smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, I asked her outright, "Are you seeing someone else?" The words felt ridiculous as they left my mouth, but I couldn't hold them in. She laughed hard, too hard. She kissed me on the forehead and called me silly. I wanted to believe her, so I did. The strange thing about betrayal is how it creeps in slowly, like a leak in the ceiling. At first, you barely notice it. Then one day, the whole roof caves in. It was around our 1-year anniversary when I first caught her in a lie. She told me she was going to visit her mother for the weekend, but her mother called me 2 days later asking if Emily was with me. My stomach dropped. When she came back Sunday night, I didn't confront her immediately. I watched her walk around the apartment, dropping her bag, humming to herself as if everything were normal. I waited until we were in bed before I asked, "So, how's your mom doing?" The silence that followed was deafening. She froze, her back stiff against the sheets. Then, without turning to look at me, she said, "She's fine." That was the first time I realized how easily she could lie. I wish I could say I left then, that I had the strength to walk away before the damage dug too deep. But love, or whatever twisted version of it I was clinging to, makes you tolerate the intolerable. I told myself she was just confused, that maybe she needed space, that I could fix whatever was broken. And for a while, things seemed better. She showered me with affection, planned a surprise weekend getaway, whispered apologies without ever naming what she was sorry for. I wanted so badly to believe that we were back on track. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something was unraveling, and soon the threads would snap completely. I guess if I had been smarter, or maybe just more honest with myself, I would have seen it coming. There were little cracks that I kept ignoring, things I brushed off as stress or maybe my own paranoia. When you love someone, you don't want to believe that the unease in your gut has a reason. You tell yourself you're tired, that you're overthinking, that she still loves you. But the truth always finds its way through the cracks, doesn't it? After that night at the bar, Sarah seemed different. Not on the surface. On the surface, she was still the same woman who kissed me goodbye in the morning, laughed when I made dumb jokes, and slid her hand into mine on walks. But underneath, something had shifted. Her smiles lingered a little too long when her phone buzzed. She'd step into the hallway to take calls, saying it was work, but her voice dropped to a hush I wasn't supposed to catch. Sometimes she'd get home later than usual, claiming deadlines or traffic, though I noticed the faint scent of cologne on her clothes that wasn't mine. I didn't want to turn into the kind of man who checks his girlfriend's phone or tracks her car. I told myself I trusted her, that I wasn't going to let jealousy poison what we had. But deep down, I already knew something was wrong. One evening I tried to confront her carefully without accusations. I asked if everything was okay, if maybe she felt distant because of work, or if I had done something. Sarah looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes that could disarm anyone, and she said, "Babe, I'm fine. We're fine. You worry too much." She kissed me after that, slow and tender, and for a moment I let myself believe her. For a moment I felt foolish for doubting her. But the unease didn't go away. It gnawed at me. And then came the night that tore everything open. It was a Friday, and she told me she was going out with coworkers to celebrate the end of a big project. I had work the next morning, so I stayed home. I didn't think much of it until around 11 p.m. when my friend Mark called. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "Hey man, I don't know if I should even be telling you this, but I just saw Sarah downtown. She wasn't with coworkers, she was with some guy. They were holding hands." My stomach dropped like a stone. I remember gripping the phone so tight my knuckles went white. I asked him to describe the guy, but he couldn't. Said it was too dark, just that he looked younger, taller than me. Mark swore he wasn't mistaken, swore it was her. I didn't say much after that. Just hung up and sat there, staring at the empty couch across from me. A storm was raging inside me, anger, denial, fear, heartbreak, all fighting for space. I wanted to believe Mark was wrong, that he saw someone else, but I knew he was. I trusted him, and more importantly, I trusted my gut. When Sarah came home around 1 a.m., she was all smiles, cheeks flushed from a few drinks, as she put it. She leaned down to kiss me, but I turned my head and the kiss landed on my cheek. She looked at me funny, like she knew something had shifted. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded, lied through my teeth, and said I was just tired. She went to bed and I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, listening to her steady breathing while my chest felt like it was caving in. The next morning, I told myself I needed proof before I confronted her. I didn't want to ruin us with suspicion alone, so I started paying closer attention. I noticed when she dressed up more for work drinks, when she laughed a little too hard at texts she claimed were from coworkers. I noticed the nights she came home smelling faintly of whiskey, even though she never touched the stuff when she was out with friends. And then came the text. I wasn't even trying to snoop. Her phone was on the counter while she was in the shower, and it lit up with a message. I swear I didn't mean to look, but my eyes caught it before I could stop myself. It read, "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." My chest tightened. My hands shook. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, to storm into the bathroom and demand answers. But instead, I set it back down, exactly where she'd left it, and walked outside. I must have stood on that porch for an hour, staring into nothing, trying to decide what the hell to do. I loved her. That was the hardest part. Even knowing what I knew, even seeing it right there in black and white, a part of me still clung to her. Still clung to the nights we stayed up talking until dawn, the mornings she whispered, "I love you," before either of us were fully awake, the feeling that for once in my life, I wasn't alone. But love, I realized, doesn't stop betrayal, and betrayal doesn't erase love. They just sit together, side by side, like oil and water, never mixing, always pulling you apart. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And no matter how much you try to pretend otherwise, it changes everything. The weeks that followed were a blur of half-truths and fragmented nights. I tried to convince myself that I was just overthinking, that maybe I was twisting shadows into monsters because I was too afraid to face the reality of what was happening. But the signs were everywhere, written across her face, hidden in her late-night messages, buried in the way she started pulling away whenever I got too close. We used to talk about everything, our fears, our stupid little dreams, even the nonsense that didn't matter. But now, conversations felt like a chore to her. I'd ask about her day and she'd give me vague, recycled lines. Busy, tired, nothing new. And then she'd retreat to her phone, fingers moving fast, eyes lighting up with the kind of spark I hadn't seen directed at me in months. One night, I caught a glimpse of a message when she left her phone on the couch while going to the bathroom. It wasn't the words that broke me. It was the way her face transformed when she returned. She grabbed the phone like it was a lifeline, tucked it close to her chest, and gave me that guilty little half-smile that told me more than any confession could. She was already gone, at least emotionally. I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to believe she'd come back to me on her own, that whatever pulled her away wasn't strong enough to hold her. But the longer I waited, the more I felt myself unravel. I started replaying every detail of our life together, searching for the exact moment I lost her. Was it something I said? Something I didn't do? Or had she been slipping away long before I noticed? The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I had gotten home earlier than usual, and the apartment was dark except for the glow of her laptop screen. She didn't hear me come in. She was too busy laughing at something on a video call, her voice softer, sweeter than it had been with me in months. And then I heard his name, the same name that had popped up in a couple of half-hidden texts I had stumbled across. "Daniel," she said in that tone reserved for intimacy, for closeness, for me. I stood there in the hallway, frozen, watching her face light up with warmth I hadn't felt in forever. My chest ached like someone had taken a knife and wedged it deep inside, twisting slowly just to see how long I could endure it. She noticed me eventually, her smile faltering, panic flickering across her features. She tried to play it off, closed the laptop quickly, walked over like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just watched her heart belong to someone else. But I couldn't unsee it. "Who was that?" I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. She paused too long, way too long, then she said, "Just a friend from work." I wanted to believe her, God, I wanted to. But lies have a certain taste once you've swallowed enough of them. I knew the difference. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked past her and locked myself in the bedroom. I sat there in the dark for hours, thinking about how love could decay so quietly, how betrayal could sneak in not like a storm but like a slow, creeping fog. By the time you realize it's around you, you're already suffocating. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, imagining her laughter with him, her whispers in the dark, her secrets that used to belong to me alone. The weight of it pressed down on me, and I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just afraid of losing her. I was afraid of losing myself in the process. When morning came, I got up, showered, and left the apartment without saying a word. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out whether I could keep living in a house where every corner now carried a ghost of a lie. I sat in a diner 2 blocks away, sipping coffee that tasted like ashes, watching people come and go. They looked normal, happy, unaware of the way a heart could break silently across the street. And that's when the thought first hit me. Maybe this wasn't just betrayal. Maybe this was the beginning of something bigger, something that would tear apart not just my relationship, but the entire life I thought I was building. Because deep down, I knew one truth I hadn't dared to say out loud. This wasn't the first time she betrayed me. And it sure as hell wouldn't be the last. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, twisting between the woman I thought I knew and the stranger she'd become. By morning, I felt hollow, like my body had been drained of everything that made me human. Still, I couldn't stay away. That evening, I found myself parked a block from Daniel's place, waiting like some pathetic stalker. His apartment building was plain brick with a cracked sidewalk out front, nothing remarkable. But I sat there, engine off, eyes glued to the door, heart pounding every time a figure appeared in the doorway. I hated myself for it. Yet I needed answers, some tangible truth I couldn't ignore. Hours dragged by. At last I saw her, Claire. She was bundled in her coat, hair tied back, walking quickly as if she wanted to avoid being seen. Daniel followed a moment later, keeping a slight distance, almost protective. My chest tightened. They didn't hold hands, but the way they moved, synchronized, comfortable, was enough. I tailed them through the streets until they slipped into a quiet bar. It wasn't the kind of place we used to go together. No music, no crowds, just dim lighting and a few scattered patrons. I waited 10 minutes before pushing the door open, my stomach churning. Inside, they were already at a booth. Claire sat facing Daniel, her shoulders tense, eyes darting around the room. He leaned forward, talking low, his hand brushing hers on the table. She pulled it back, but not harshly, like she'd done it before. I forced myself into a corner seat, trying to blend in, though every nerve in me was screaming. Their conversation was hushed, words lost under the low hum of the bar. I ordered a whiskey I didn't want, staring at the glass just to avoid staring at them. Then Daniel reached into his jacket and slid something across the table, a small box, not wrapped, not hidden, just placed there as if he'd done it without thinking. Claire looked at it, eyes wide, then shook her head. She pushed it back toward him, but her lips trembled like she wasn't sure. My pulse spiked. An engagement ring. No, it couldn't be. I couldn't breathe. I gripped the edge of my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Finally, she shoved the box into her purse. She didn't put it on the table, didn't give it back, she kept it. That detail burned me alive. I stumbled out of the bar before I could make a scene, gasping cold night air like a drowning man. The city lights blurred in my vision. I wanted to scream, to tear the world apart, but all I could do was lean against my car and shake. That night I confronted her again. She was already home, pretending to read on the couch. When I asked about Daniel, her whole body froze. "Why are you asking me this?" she whispered. "Because I saw you," I snapped. "At the bar with him with that box." Her eyes filled with panic, then hardened like steel. "You're following me now. Jesus, do you even hear yourself?" "Don't turn this on me," I said, voice breaking. "What was in the box, Claire?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, "Nothing you think, it's not what it looks like." But her hands shook as she spoke, betraying her calm mask. "Then show me," I demanded. "Prove it." She clutched her purse to her chest like it was life itself. "I can't, not now, please just trust me." Those words, "trust me," cut deeper than any blade. After everything, she still had the audacity to say that. I turned away from her, because if I kept looking, I was afraid of what I might do. My chest heaved, breath ragged, anger boiling so close to the surface it scared me. That night I slept in the car, the cold leather digging into my back. It felt almost like punishment, but I couldn't bring myself to be in the same bed with her, not after what I saw. The following days blurred. Work became impossible. I couldn't focus, couldn't function. I kept replaying every detail, every shift in her expression, every word she wouldn't say. And the box, always the box. One evening I broke down and drove back to Daniel's place. His lights were on. Through the window I could see him packing, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing wildly. He looked worried, restless, like a man on the edge. A shadow passed behind him, Claire. I couldn't take it anymore. Rage exploded inside me. I stormed out of the car and up the steps, pounding on the door with fists that shook with fury. When Daniel opened it, his face twisted in shock. "What the hell are you doing here?" Behind him, Claire froze, eyes wide, mouth open like she wanted to scream. And in that frozen moment, I realized, whatever was happening between them, it wasn't just about me anymore. Something bigger, darker was at play. The morning after she left was the quietest I had ever known. The air in the apartment hung heavy, as though the walls themselves mourned her absence. Her perfume lingered faintly in the bedroom, that sweet floral trace that once made me ache with longing but now only reminded me of betrayal. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, replaying everything she had said, every tear, every desperate plea. And though part of me hated her, another part still longed for her return. That was the cruelest twist of all. Love doesn't simply vanish because someone destroys it. It clings, stubborn and irrational, like a wound that refuses to close. I didn't hear from her for weeks. Silence became my companion, and I almost grew used to it. I buried myself in work, avoided friends, and lived like a ghost in my own skin. But then, one night, my phone buzzed with her name flashing across the screen. For a long moment I stared at it, my heart hammering, my thumb trembling over the answer button. Against every shred of reason, I picked up. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. "I just wanted to hear you to know if you're okay." I almost laughed, okay. But instead I found myself saying, "I'm breathing." "That's enough, isn't it?" she sighed, a sound filled with regret but no words that could repair what had been broken. She told me she had moved in with Daniel, that she was trying to make things work. The confession stabbed deeper than the betrayal itself. I realized then she hadn't left me because of guilt or self-reflection. She had left because she chose him. Still, I kept listening. I don't know why. Maybe because a part of me needed to understand, to gather the last fragments of her truth. She admitted things I had suspected but never confirmed. How long it had been going on, how many nights she had lied about work late or out with friends. Every word was a brick in the wall between us, yet I couldn't stop pressing for more. It was like staring into a wound, unable to look away even as it bled. After that call, I made a choice. I blocked her number, deleted her from every corner of my digital life, and began the slow, agonizing process of reclaiming myself. But healing doesn't come clean. It comes in jagged waves. Some days I felt strong, others I collapsed under the weight of memory. I'd walk past a coffee shop we used to love, and suddenly the taste of betrayal would fill my mouth again. I'd hear her favorite song in a store, and it felt like the universe was mocking me. Recovery wasn't linear. It was a battlefield, and I was fighting ghosts. Months later, I ran into her by chance. I was downtown crossing the street when I heard someone call my name. I turned, and there she was, hair shorter, face thinner, eyes carrying shadows I hadn't seen before. Daniel wasn't with her. For a heartbeat, we just stared. And in that silent exchange, I saw everything: her guilt, my pain, the ruins of what we had built. She walked closer, her lips parting as if to speak, but I shook my head. Words weren't needed. She had made her choice, and I had finally accepted mine. I turned and walked away, not with bitterness this time, but with a strange, weary peace. The kind you only find after surviving a storm. And that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break you, it remakes you. I learned that love isn't always enough, that trust once shattered can't simply be glued back together. I learned that sometimes the hardest thing isn't letting go of someone else, but letting go of the version of yourself who believed in them so completely. I don't tell this story to paint her as a villain or myself as a martyr. Life is messier than that. She was flawed, I was blind, and together we created something beautiful that collapsed under its own weight. But even in ruin, there's a strange kind of clarity. Now when I think of her, I don't feel the same crushing ache. I feel gratitude in a way. Because through the wreckage, I found strength I never knew I had. I built myself back, piece by jagged piece, and discovered a truth I carry with me still. Sometimes the people who break us are the ones who teach us how to stand. And though her ghost will always walk beside me in quiet moments, I no longer fear it. It's just a reminder of the man I was, and the man I had to become.